unknown civilization living right here of Bronze Age people. And that's who built Stonehenge.
Ground-penetrating radar detected something beneath Stonehenge that archaeology never predicted. Not under the stones, under the entire landscape. Massive pits arranged in perfect arcs.
It's a loss for Wales, no doubt, but Wales has contributed so many rocks to this monument, I'm sure Scotland can have one.
Buried boundaries extending hundreds of meters. Circular features carved deep into bedrock, invisible from the surface, organized with precision that shouldn't exist in Neolithic Britain. For centuries, we thought Stonehenge was complete. The monument we understood, the scans say otherwise. They suggest the stones are just the visible part, that beneath Salisbury Plain lies something larger, something planned at a scale that challenges everything we know about prehistoric organization. The features show coordination, symmetry, deliberate spacing across distances that exceed known Neolithic capabilities. No one claims it's impossible, but no one can explain why it's there, or what it was for, or how societies without writing could organize construction at this scale. Beneath the monument, the landscape holds patterns that refuse simple explanation. Stonehenge is supposed to be solved, measured, dated, understood through generations of scholarship. Radiocarbon dating places its earliest phases around 3000 BCE. Construction continued in stages over more than 1,000 years. Earthworks first, then timber structures, finally the iconic sarsen and bluestone pillars. Each phase reflects evolving social priorities rather than a single master plan. The mainstream interpretation is straightforward. Stonehenge functioned as a ceremonial monument within a ritual landscape.
Stone monuments believed to have been hidden for thousands of years, not far from the famous site of Stonehenge.
Its alignment with the summer solstice suggests symbolic connections to seasons, cosmology, the passage of time. The Stonehenge Avenue, a processional route linking the monument to the river Avon, reinforces the idea of sacred movement through sacred space. Nearby burial mounds and earthworks create a landscape devoted to remembrance, transition, collective identity. The logistics are considered achievable. Large populations, seasonal labor, simple tools, sustained cooperation. No advanced technology required. Only organization and shared belief. Archaeologists point to comparable efforts across prehistoric Europe. Similar henges, stone circles, earthwork complexes appear throughout Britain, suggesting shared cultural practices. Crucially, this framework leaves little room for surprise. While details remain debated, specific chronologies, precise functions, the overall picture is stable. Stonehenge's role as a ceremonial monument is treated as resolved. The monument fits known Neolithic patterns. Its scale is unusual, but not unprecedented. Its purpose is complex but not mysterious. When textbooks describe prehistoric Britain, Stonehenge appears as an achievement fully explained by the capabilities and beliefs we attribute to Neolithic societies. Within this model, questions remain about specific construction techniques or symbolic meanings. But the fundamental nature of the site is considered clear. It was built for ceremony, it marked astronomical events. It served as a focal point for communities gathering at seasonal intervals. The framework accommodates variation and complexity, while maintaining core certainty about what Stonehenge was and how it functioned. Within this understanding, Stonehenge's meaning may be layered.
It's a loss for Wales, no doubt, but Wales has contributed so many rocks to this monument, I'm sure Scotland can have one.
But it is not unknown. The fracture in this settled understanding did not come from excavation. It came from distance. In the early 2010s, archaeologists began deploying ground-penetrating radar and magnetometry across Salisbury Plain, not just around the stones, but across entire square kilometers of surrounding landscape. These technologies were not new. Radar had been used in archaeology for decades, but this scale was unprecedented. The goal was straightforward: build comprehensive subsurface maps. Survey first, interpret later. The expectation was refinement of existing knowledge, not fundamental revision. At first, results appeared familiar. natural hollows where ancient streams once flowed, old plow marks from medieval agriculture, minor archaeological features exactly where expected, small pits, post holes, faint traces of temporary structures. Nothing suggested revision was needed. Then larger anomalies began appearing, buried features that did not correspond to anything previously documented, some circular, others linear. Several formed arcs that echoed the curvature of the monument itself, but at distances far beyond its visible boundaries, hundreds of meters out, in some cases over a kilometer from the stone circle. Initial responses were cautious. Erosion patterns, perhaps, geological variation in the chalk bedrock, misread signals caused by soil moisture or composition. Radar artifacts are common. Experienced teams know to expect them. Calibration was checked. Data was reprocessed using different algorithms. Alternative filters designed to eliminate false positives were applied. Independent teams were brought in to verify findings. The anomalies did not dissolve. They multiplied. As survey coverage expanded, these features began forming patterns. Their scale exceeded anything previously associated with the monument. Some extended hundreds of meters, arranged with spacing that resisted simple explanation. They showed symmetry, deliberate placement, consistent construction methods. What made researchers pause was not contradiction of existing interpretations. Stonehenge still aligned with the solstice. The stones were still Neolithic. The ritual landscape remained valid, but the spatial logic began to stretch. The monument no longer appeared as the central feature of a known system. It began to resemble a surface fragment of something far larger, something whose full extent remained hidden. The data did not contradict Stonehenge.
Now, a new analysis shows that the 6-ton iconic altar stone at the heart of Stonehenge.
It revealed that we had only been seeing a fraction of it. The first category of subsurface anomalies emerged slowly as datasets were layered and compared across the wider landscape. What appeared were not isolated features, but large-scale forms whose size and organization challenged established assumptions. The most striking discovery involved massive buried pits arranged in broad arcs. These were not small depressions. Individual pits measured several meters deep and up to 10 meters across. They were cut through solid chalk bedrock, the same geological layer supporting the standing stones. Their distribution formed partial rings extending far beyond the stone circle itself, in some cases more than a kilometer from the monument's center. What troubled analysts was spacing. The placement appeared deliberate rather than random, suggesting coordinated layout rather than unrelated ritual acts. Natural sinkholes were considered and tested against geological models, but these pits showed uniform depth profiles, consistent fill sequences, regular intervals. That is not how natural processes behave, that is design. A second anomaly took shape as previously unknown circular features buried beneath the plain. Unlike henges or burial mounds visible on the surface, these circles existed only underground. They were incomplete, fragmented by millennia of erosion and agricultural activity, yet their curvature could be reconstructed. When archaeologists traced the surviving arcs, they formed near-perfect circles. Some exceeded 100 meters in diameter. Their scale implied planning that extended well beyond the ceremonial focus traditionally attributed to Stonehenge. These were not supporting features. They appeared to be co-equal structures, monuments in their own right, simply never intended to rise above ground. Linear subsurface boundaries introduced a third category. Magnetometry revealed long, straight divisions cutting across the landscape. These lines did not align with known pathways, property boundaries, or natural geological faults. Some extended several hundred meters without significant deviation. Their straightness alone suggested intentionality. You do not accidentally create lines that hold their bearing across uneven terrain for such distances. That requires surveying, planning, sustained effort maintained across generations. The fourth anomaly concerned depth and construction consistency. Ground-penetrating radar showed that many features, pits in different locations, boundaries in separate areas, were cut to similar depths and filled using comparable methods. Pits separated by hundreds of meters showed nearly identical depth profiles. Linear boundaries exhibited consistent construction techniques. This implied not only intention, but coordination over time, a shared system of rules governing how these features were created, regardless of specific location or chronological phase. Archaeologists tested findings against known natural processes. Erosion produces irregular edges and uneven depths. Periglacial activity creates scatter, not symmetry. Agricultural disturbance from centuries of plowing blurs boundaries and fills depressions unevenly. It does not preserve features and patterned arrangements extending across square kilometers. Again and again, the anomalies resisted reduction to familiar natural causes. What made these discoveries particularly unsettling was their invisibility. For centuries, nothing on the surface hinted at their existence. Stonehenge appeared complete unto itself.
This is the altar stone, the heart of Stonehenge, now partially buried. It's one of the largest stones here.
Yet beneath the ground, the data suggested a landscape shaped as deliberately as the monument above it. As physical features were mapped, a second layer of anomalies began to emerge. Not structures themselves, but relationships. Patterns of alignment, absence, and scale that complicated interpretation without offering clear alternatives. The first relational anomaly involved alignment with known ceremonial pathways. Several buried features appeared to echo the orientation of the Stonehenge Avenue, the processional route linking the monument to the River Avon. This was not direct overlap, but resonance of direction and curvature, as if the invisible features beneath the soil participated in the same geometric logic as routes above it. If coincidental, the coincidence repeated with unusual consistency. Features in different areas, buried at different depths, maintained similar angular relationships to known surface monuments. If intentional, it implied coordination across elements never meant to be seen together. A hidden infrastructure supporting visible ceremony. A second anomaly concerned scale and its implications for labor organization. Population estimates for Neolithic Wessex suggest communities capable of impressive collective effort. Evidence exists for trade networks, seasonal gatherings, shared ritual practices, but newly identified features extended across distances that challenged existing assumptions about sustained coordination. The buried pits alone would have required thousands of person-hours to excavate through chalk bedrock using stone and antler tools. The linear boundaries represented even greater investment, not just in initial construction, but in maintenance of alignment and consistency. This implied landscape-level planning sustained not over decades, but across generations. It raised questions about continuity of purpose, transmission of technical knowledge, and social structures capable of directing such work. Without corresponding evidence of administrative centers or dense habitation nearby, that absence formed the third anomaly. Excavations conducted around subsurface features revealed surprisingly little evidence of domestic activity. No clusters of dwellings, no concentrations of hearths or food preparation areas, no dense pottery scatters or animal bone deposits typical of sustained occupation. The features existed in apparent isolation from everyday life. Whatever their function, it did not involve living there. These were not settlements, not agricultural infrastructure, not defensive works. They were something else, something that required enormous communal effort to create, but left almost no trace of the communities that created them, as if the landscape modifications were deliberately separated from habitation, as if human presence near these features was temporary, episodic, perhaps restricted to specific ritual occasions. The fourth anomaly appeared through regional comparison. As subsurface survey techniques were applied to other sites across the Wessex landscape, similar patterns began to surface. Avebury showed hints of buried circular features beyond its visible henge. Durrington walls exhibited linear boundaries, extending farther than surface features suggested. Even smaller henges revealed traces of subsurface organization invisible from ground level. None matched Stonehenge's pattern exactly, but enough similarities emerged to suggest regional conceptual frameworks rather than isolated innovation. Multiple communities across a wide area appeared to be working from shared principles. Principles governing not just individual monuments, but the organization of landscape itself. Each relational anomaly could be explained cautiously when considered alone, but taken together, they produced uncomfortable convergence. The invisible began to align with the visible. What lay beneath seemed to participate in the same organizing logic as what stood above. The realization does not happen in the field. It happens indoors, in a temporary survey lab set up near Salisbury Plain.
Dismantle and take their sacred stone circle with them. They then migrate to Salisbury Plain,
Where the landscape exists only as layers on a screen. The room is quiet, lit by monitors displaying subsurface maps in muted colors, bands of contrast, faint curves, interrupted lines that mean nothing to untrained eyes but everything to the researchers studying them. Several team members stand close together, arms folded, watching as the latest dataset resolves. They have been processing returns from a new survey grid, comparing fresh data against older scans, checking for consistency. At first, the shapes seem abstract, just another pattern in a landscape full of patterns. Then someone adjusts the display scale. Someone zooms out. The arcs widen. The boundaries extend farther than anyone expected. What appeared as disconnected features suddenly looks connected, part of something much larger. The partial circles align. The linear divisions form zones. The buried pits trace curves that continue the geometry of the monument itself, but at scales that dwarf it. No one speaks immediately. Instruments are checked again. Calibration values reviewed. The same datasets are loaded a second time, then a third, using different processing parameters. Alternative filters designed to eliminate artifacts are applied. The shapes remain, consistent across every method, visible in multiple frequency bands, confirmed by independent sensors. There is a pause that feels deliberate, almost ceremonial in its weight. These are not newcomers to ambiguity. Archaeology lives with uncertainty, with interpretations that shift as new evidence emerges. But this is different. The features are not subtle. They are not marginal discoveries that might be explained away with minor adjustments to existing models. They are large enough to fundamentally alter the scale at which Stonehenge must be understood. A conversation begins quietly, not about interpretation yet, how to describe what is visible without implying more than the data strictly allows. How to present findings without forcing them prematurely into narratives that may not accommodate them. There is no excitement in the room, only caution. One researcher points to a particular feature on the screen, then lowers their hand without finishing the observation. Another steps back, as if physical distance might help clarify meaning. Outside, the plain looks unchanged. The stones stand where they have always stood.
The first substantive map of the landscape of Stonehenge, touching every part of the landscape.
Nothing visible reflects the complexity now mapped beneath the surface, as surveys continued and datasets accumulated over subsequent field seasons. A threshold was quietly crossed. What had initially seemed like isolated irregularities became recurring features, confirmed by multiple instruments and revisited across different years of analysis. Ground-penetrating radar, magnetometry, electromagnetic induction surveys, all returned to the same essential conclusions. The subsurface patterns were real, extensive, resistant to simplification. At this stage, the existing explanatory model began to strain under its own assumptions. Stonehenge could still be described as a ceremonial monument. Its visible elements still fit within Neolithic traditions. The astronomical alignments remained valid. The ritual interpretation held, but the growing body of hidden features demanded an increasing number of exceptions and qualifications. Each new anomaly required an additional clause. a caveat, a provisional explanation that worked for one feature but failed to account for the pattern as a whole. The language used in publications became more carefully hedged. Confidence gave way to caution. A deeper problem emerged from the nature of archaeological preservation itself. What survives is not a neutral sample of the past. Erosion, later construction, agricultural activity. These selectively erase evidence. Surface monuments endure because they are visible, monumental, built to last. Subsurface features vanish unless detected by technology that has only recently become sophisticated enough to reveal them at landscape scale. The absence of visible traces near the buried pits and boundaries no longer functioned as evidence of their insignificance. Instead, it became part of what needed explanation. If these features required such enormous effort to create, why were they not marked on the surface? Why no visible monuments to indicate their presence or define their boundaries? This sharpened a fundamental question. Were these features marginal elements of a system, already understood, or were they evidence of organization operating at scales the existing model had never anticipated? As more square kilometers were surveyed, dismissal became less economical as an interpretive strategy. It required assuming repeated coincidence across independent datasets, repeated misinterpretation by experienced teams, repeated instrumental error across different technologies and survey seasons. The conversation among specialists shifted. Statements that once carried implicit certainty were rephrased as tentative observations. The framework that had successfully explained Stonehenge for generations remained valid for what it had always explained.
Forests and over mountains. Alternatively, it could have been brought by sea on a giant raft, but this is a huge stone.
But it no longer encompassed everything the evidence now demanded. From this point forward, certainty about Stonehenge could no longer stand alone. In response to the mounting strain on existing interpretations, researchers began outlining hypotheses, carefully tiered, explicitly provisional, framed as tools for thinking, rather than definitive answers. None are presented as solutions. Each addresses part of the evidence while leaving other parts unresolved. Hypothesis 1. Expanded ritual. The most conservative interpretation holds that newly detected features represent ceremonial elements already implied by existing models, now simply visible at a scale previously inaccessible. In this view, the pits, arcs, and buried boundaries are extensions of ritual behavior, markers defining sacred zones, processional limits, symbolic enclosures whose meanings were never meant to be read from the surface. Researchers who favor this approach stress continuity with known Neolithic practices. The features fit within established cosmological frameworks and monument building traditions, even if their collective scale exceeds prior expectations. The limitation of this hypothesis is cumulative rather than individual. It can explain discrete features convincingly, but struggles to account for their coordination across an vast distances without invoking levels of planning the model does not typically accommodate. Hypothesis 2. Underestimated organization. A second tier suggests that Neolithic social organization in the Stonehenge region has been systematically underestimated. Here, the subsurface features are interpreted as evidence of sustained landscape-scale planning, projects requiring long-term coordination, authority structures capable of directing labor across generations, shared technical standards maintained over centuries. This does not imply advanced technology or knowledge beyond Neolithic capabilities, only organizational capacity operating at scales rarely attributed to prehistoric societies. Archaeologists exploring this hypothesis point to comparable efforts elsewhere in prehistoric Europe: causewayed enclosures, cursus monuments, henge complexes that all demonstrate sophisticated collective action. The discomfort lies in its implications. If correct, Stonehenge was not the focal point of ritual activity, but one visible node within a managed system whose full extent has gone largely unrecognized.
Elaborate series of stone monuments believed to have been hidden for thousands of years, not far from the famous site of Stonehenge.
The monument may have always been intended as part of a larger whole, a whole that remained deliberately invisible. Hypothesis 3. Symbolic landscape. The most unsettling interpretation avoids functional explanations altogether. It proposes that these features formed part of a symbolic system whose organizing logic no longer translates into categories accessible to modern interpretation. Not architecture in any conventional sense, not infrastructure, not purely ceremonial in ways we recognize. Instead, patterned meaning inscribed directly into landscape, a way of organizing space according to principles that have not survived in any recoverable form. Researchers advancing this view emphasize what is absent: no texts, no oral traditions, no explanatory artifacts. We possess the physical traces, but not the conceptual framework that originally made them meaningful. This hypothesis cannot be tested through conventional archaeological methods. It exists at the interpretive edge, where evidence meets the limits of knowability. Stonehenge remains visible, photographed millions of times each year, visited. Described in textbooks as one of prehistory's most thoroughly understood monuments, what lies beneath it does not share that visibility. The tools that revealed the hidden features are precise, but they are not excavations. They translate contrasts in soil density, moisture content, magnetic properties into signals, absence into inference, difference into outline. What they offer is not access, but suggestion, a hint of form without complete understanding. That limitation matters. Excavation cannot follow every anomaly without destroying the context needed to interpret what remains. So the landscape stays largely intact, holding patterns that can be measured but not fully exposed. The new discoveries do not overturn what was already understood. They do not invalidate generations of scholarship. They expand the boundary of uncertainty. The stones above ground still stand, weathered and familiar.
The much-needed preservation work taking place at Stonehenge to protect one of the mysteries of the ancient world.
But they now appear less like a complete statement and more like a visible fragment of something broader, quieter, deliberately incomplete, or complete in ways that no longer register as completion. Across Salisbury Plain, beneath fields that look unchanged, the subsurface data suggests repetition, intention, organization, at scales that challenge assumptions about what prehistoric societies could conceive. Perhaps Stonehenge was never meant to be understood from the surface alone. Perhaps the stones were always the visible anchor for something else, something we are only now beginning to recognize existed at all. Beneath Stonehenge, he needs the ground still holds patterns that refuse simple explanation.